Welcome to the U.S. latest news channel. Watch the video to the end to find out the current and breaking news about the Russian war in Ukraine. In parallel with all these statements and developments, the units attached to the Russian military units are taking a number of actions in order to prevent and stop the unexpected counteroffensive of Ukraine. The Russian military navy, which has sent October reinforcements to the sides of the Kharkov enclave, wants to regain dominance in this region. Only on the battlefield, but also on the perception of the general public who wants to be successful at the table, and the Russian government, the Russian Defense Ministry, and the Kremlin through Izium units that are close to settlements and Kupiansk, who is believed to lead to various images of a Russian military convoy shared with the public world. While it is observed that many military unit convoys are on their way in the images, Russia's moves will be made in the name of future processes. It is also awaited with great curiosity. After the Russian government ordered an attack on Russian troop convoys, there was also a statement by the Ukrainian military troops. The commander of the armed forces of Ukraine, Valery Zelensky, Russia has decided to attack and October additional reinforcement moves to the region, he said. Valery Zelensky, it is a very difficult situation for us, for the whole of Ukraine, but we will continue to move forward and liberate the regions of Ukraine from occupation. Standing behind us in all the circumstances for us, help us, loyal and no matter what happens, waiting for us always give thanks to Ukrainian citizens, thank you saying they would show continuity in the operations of stability regions with the invading troops announced that they would cleanse from. The Ukrainian Special Military Units, SSU, also shared a number of photos that stopped and controlled the Alpha forces in the city of Kupiansk with their statement. He underlined that the Kupiansk province has always been a Ukrainian city and will always remain in that state. In addition to these developments, the 92nd Ukrainian Armed Forces, which is attached to October 1 of the military brigade. Ukrainian soldiers from the battalion unfurled the Ukrainian flag above the municipal board of Kupiansk. Ukraine is also continuing some important operations in order to end the so-called invasion attempt made by Russian military units on its land parts and to take back its temporarily occupied territories. Indeed, as described previously, located in strategically important locations, regions, purify the invading Russian troops away from the campus on behalf of the logistics center of offensive actions against continues to hold and cut off contact. The Ukrainian army has started using French-made armored personnel carriers, the Ukrainian Ground Forces Command announced. These armored carriers, which France donated to the Ukrainian army, have already become the dreaded dream of the invading Russian army in the places where they are used. The Ukrainian army began to use these equipment donated by France, especially in the territories located in the south of the Ukrainian territory and under the rule of the occupying Russian army. The soldiers in the Ukrainian army have a wider range of movement thanks to these vehicles donated by France, and they have secured themselves thanks to these safer vehicles. These vehicles have also been used for the evacuation of civilians in some areas liberated by the Ukrainian army from the occupation. Thanks to these vehicles gifted by France, the Ukrainian army is able to carry out the transportation and dispatch of ammunition and equipment as well as the evacuation of civilians thanks to these vehicles. The Ukrainian General Staff announced that 5 settlements around the Donetsk region occupied by the Russian army have been captured by the Ukrainian army. It was confirmed by both the Ukrainian army and the occupying Russian army that among these settlements were Yampol, Novoselivka, Chandrihalovo, Drobyshiv, and Stavki. December. Seized by the Ukrainian army. Ukrainian regions by the army. While the army has done that is in progress, the shipment of troops and equipment in this successful operation. The Ukrainian commander of the Ukrainian army in Donetsk bases would be established in all regions in the name of getting back seized and occupied residential places and the order of Russian President Vladimir Putin annexed by the invading Russian army in the past days, which has been taken from the hands of the Russian army invading the territory of Ukraine, what was supposed to be announced. Recently, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that most residential areas in the Donetsk region that were occupied by the occupying Russian army have been captured by the Ukrainian army. The chief of the General Staff of Ukraine continued his statement, explaining that the roads and bridges where the Russian army carries military equipment in the Luhansk region are under the control of the Ukrainian army. Russia recently announced the annexation of Donetsk and Luhansk regions by order of Russian President Vladimir Putin, but the Ukrainian army continues to conduct intensive attacks on the region in order to retake these regions. In another statement made by the Security Council of Ukraine during this war, it was announced that many settlements in the occupied and annexed territories had been recaptured by the Ukrainian army. The work of the Russian General Staff of the General Staff of Ukraine and Ukraine by claiming that this statement of the Security Council of Russian territory annexed the land regions are unfounded and that this was now to be made to any intrusion attempt for the attacking side will be heavy the result of the threat that has been expressed. In its report published today, the Ukrainian intelligence agency said that the referendum was not held with justice and the free will of the people in the regions where the referendum was held, and that this referendum also struck a blow to demoralization. Russian President Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, said in his speech in Russia after the annexation of the occupied Donetsk and Luhansk regions that these regions now belong to Russian territory, saying that any attack on these regions will result in a declaration of war on Russia and warning that they may use nuclear power. Many countries of the world, on the other hand, announced that these annexations made by Russia were not recognized, and the annexed territories would still be considered lands belonging to the territory of Ukraine. The Turkish Foreign Ministry said in a statement that Russia's annexation of the occupied Luhansk and Donetsk regions was not recognized and that Russia should immediately end the war. The General Staff of Ukraine announced that Russian soldiers in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, which are under the occupation of the Russian army, are forcing the people living in the region to join the Russian army. Another report published today, the intelligence service of Ukraine in Kherson in the Russian army under the occupation of the regions, etc., of military-age men in the Russian army by providing a choice between killing or forcibly arresting joined the Russian army in the Russian army, he claimed. The Security Council of Ukraine announced that the Ukrainian people in the occupied territories are carrying out resistance today and are causing difficulties to the Russian army with individual armament. While the resistance of the people of the region to the Russian army continues, the Ukrainian army has begun to take control of the settlements around the occupied regions by taking them out of the hands of the Russian army again. Recently, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that many occupied territories have been recaptured as a result of intensive attacks by the Ukrainian army, and normal life has begun in many recaptured areas. In a region taken from the hands of the occupying Russian army, schools, hospitals, and pharmacies have started to actively serve again, keeping up with normal living conditions. In a statement made by the spokesman of the Security Council of Ukraine, he claimed that the Russian army forcibly conscripted men from the people of the region in Crimea, which is under the occupation of the Russian army, and took them to mobilization camps located in Russia to fight against Ukraine. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky jointly announced today that the Ukrainian army has recaptured many settlements around the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, which are under the occupation of the Russian army, and most of the Russian soldiers in the region have surrendered to the Ukrainian army. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continued his statement with the continuation of the 10th Ukrainian Army for the successes in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, Mountain Assault Brigade and 54th. He congratulated the soldiers of the Mechanized Brigade and said that these troops continue to advance in the Lyman region, located north of the city of Donetsk. Also, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed his sincere thanks to the Ukrainian intelligence service. The Ukrainian intelligence agency has continued to provide information to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian military without interruption since the Russian invasion began. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that an application for NATO membership has been submitted through a fast-track application process and the necessary signatures have been signed. If Ukraine accepts NATO membership, Ukraine will become a NATO country under occupation, and in accordance with NATO rules, NATO member countries will be obliged to help the Ukrainian army and the territory of Ukraine. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine announced in recent hours that the Ukrainian army has been intensively attacking HIMARS and offensive in the areas that are under the occupation of the Russian army and are connected to the territory of Russia with the current annexations, and the people of the region should show resistance. Who do you think will be the winner of the Russian-Ukrainian war? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.